Thanks for tuning in to Stark Reality. Financial empowerment on the road to personal freedom. My name is Gregory Starks. I'm your host. And we hope and pray that you get something out of this episode of Stark Reality. Thank you. What's going on? What's going on? It's time for another episode of Stark Reality. My name is Gregory Starks. I'm going to be your host. And I want to thank you for joining me. I want to thank you for listening in on what I have to say about certain issues. I try to keep a financial perspective with things. Sometimes I veer off. I guess I'm still finding my way. As far as the structure and everything. Now, today what I want to talk about is, since it's June and we are recently commemorating the 100th anniversary. Well, I guess you wouldn't call it an anniversary, but it's been 100 years since the Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Greenwood district was burned down. And recently there's been an effort to, it seems, bring this massacre to light so more people can understand and learn what happened back in this time. So I'm not going to talk about necessarily the massacre. What I am going to say, all right, I'll give a brief for anybody who doesn't know what happened. So the Greenwood district was a black or native black community in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They had a vision for a black community. And this time you're still, living in a segregated America. So a young man, he was working in a hotel, or not a hotel, working in a building, and he would come and shine shoes because the black patrons would have to have a separate area so they could get their shoes shined from the whites that worked in the building. So back in this time, there was a lady that controlled the elevator, and word is the elevator shook. The woman kind of tipped over, fell in the man's hands. She screamed. They may have known each other, who knows, because if he came through there and ruined the elevator all the time, she should have had a rapport or some kind of a relationship to know the person, So ultimately, he was accused of putting his hands trying to attack a white woman. Where you get from there is he gets arrested, and the lynch mob comes out because back in these times, the main excuse to lynch a black man was to say he was going to hurt white women. He was a monster. He's big and scary, they call him now. He's dangerous. So the lynch mob came out. They wanted blood. They wanted to hang this man. The black community in Greenwood decided that's not happening. We're not going to let that happen. So they came up to the police station with guns to protect this young man. So as a result, that pisses off the crowd, and it makes them even more upset, and the crowd grows in number, and they want blood even more. From this, the black community came together, and they decided, all right, we need more numbers. So they got the guns. They went outside, went out to the police station, faced off against the mob. something went down. One man tried to grab something from another man. Words were exchanged, and pride took hold, and a riot ensued. From there, the police department at the time, they started to deputize random white people in the crowd, equip them with firearms and weapons so that they could fight the black side. So this fight goes on, and it ends up back in the Greenwood community. That ended up being ground zero for a huge race riot. The black citizens were successful on multiple fronts. So at this point, the white supremacist mob took it a little further, and they used National Guard, it appears, and they dropped bombs on the city and blew everything up. They surrounded the perimeter, walked in, gained people out of their homes, killed people, burned everybody's house down, burned the businesses down on what they called the Negro or the Black Wall Street, and they destroyed the community. So now here we are, 2021. Sorry, took a sip of my tea. So here we are, 2021, and we're remembering Greenwood, Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma. We're remembering that now, and as a result, there's this investigation. It looks like there was a History Channel special or documentary, and they talked about the exhumation and pulling out the dead bodies in the graves, the mass graves, and giving them funerals. Things that I consider a lot of symbolic gestures. Things that I would consider not fully fixing or remedying the massacre. I'm sure it didn't. Well, it hasn't even been 100 years since World War II. And in reference to the Holocaust, didn't take 100 years to treat the people like human beings. Beyond that, there's no talk about compensation in reference to repairing, in reference to the descendants or even the survivors, because they're still alive. It seems to me like it might be some kind of tactic to let's wait until they're all gone, and then we'll start to talk about that, and then we can use the excuse, well, since everybody passed away, we don't have to give you anything because you weren't actually there. But there's several individuals who are still alive, who survived that massacre. But to the topic though, is it possible, or how would a new Black Wall Street be created? Well, I guess first you'd have to look and refer back to the old Black Wall Street as a possible point of reference, as a learning model. There's a lot that can be learned from that disaster. There's a lot that can be learned from the successes and the shortcomings of the original Black Wall Street. Me, I'm not a fan of the Black Wall Street name or even calling it that. To me, it seems like if you call something a Black Wall Street, it's like, oh, we've got something that's similar to what white people are doing. Wall Street initially was where you trade slave options, not really commodities or stocks. It was slavery. I wouldn't be against just walking away from that Wall Street moniker altogether. But I mean, that's neither here nor there. So I think you will look back to the original Black Wall Street or Greenwood community and realize that the first thing that you have to do is establish community. In order to have a community, it's going to take some like-minded individuals that want to have a community, that want to be self-sustaining. It takes a lot of steps to get to that point. But if you look at a lot of other cultures in America, you don't really find issue with finding actual cultural communities. There are very few black cultural communities, and since the 1960s, since integration, you're going to have even less. Probably the peak of black community and blackness is probably around 1968 going into the early 70s. And then war was waged against black people in the form of integration. Once we integrated, at that point, your community can't survive because, like I said, in regards to calling it the Negro Wall Street or the Black Wall Street, that still shows that you still got this complex of wanting to be like white people. And then that hustle, that trick of integration had black people thinking like, wow, we can assimilate into white society and we can basically become American. Because as an American, as a black American, you never were afforded the rights of being an actual American. And we're talking about people who were just probably one generation out of slavery. So these are some really smart and savvy individuals, but also at the same time, they weren't safe anywhere else. So they began their own community. So the idea for an all-black community, a thriving all-black community, came from two individuals who, in my opinion, are extremely important black figures whose names should be circulated, who should be known for children to know and understand their story, and they should be studied, and there should probably be pictures of these people in people's homes based on their vision. But these two people are, number one, John Stratford. He was a real estate, I don't know, maybe mogul, tycoon, but he was an entrepreneur in real estate, had successful real estate. Then the other person was O.W. Gurley. And these two men, they came together and they had a vision and they wanted to start their own black community because they felt we can do anything they can do and we don't need them. If we want to start our own community, if we want to have our own businesses, our own movie theaters, our own hotels, our own bars, our own restaurants, we can do it here. So they took it upon themselves, and along with the community who was on board, they built this black community. So the number one step in establishing a Black Wall Street is a sense of community, a sense of buying within your community and keeping the money in your community. Community is a sense of everybody depends on everybody. So we have to initially set the foundation, and the mindset is the foundation to establish a thriving, a real black community. We live in a time now after few generations after the white flight, when black people started living in the urban areas and all the white people ran out. The number one example I would say is an opportunity missed would be in the case of gentrification, where that which we had in those places where we lived at after white people got out of there and the investment stopped happening, and is the gentrification. Gentrification devalued black communities. As a result, white people come back and make it too expensive and put more investment into these communities so that the white people take it back over, and the black people end up running out to outside the city into the suburbs to live because they can't afford to live in the city anymore. Nothing has changed. There's no valuable new resources. The only difference is white people are there. And it shows you that black people are a detriment to white wealth because white people determine the value. And we haven't determined the value on ourselves, in large part due to integration. So these two gentlemen, they established this black community, this Greenwood community, and they had a strip of businesses and a lot of nice homes, and all these individuals were doing well for themselves because the money circulated within them. It stayed there. But ultimately, it starts with the vision, with the mindset of community building. One area where it seems to me that they may have missed the boat is they didn't have I wouldn't say military, but they had like a militia, but they didn't have a strategic military or protection presence. When I think about military, you think, okay, you've got the National Guard holds you down domestically against domestic. You've got the FBI, and then you've got the CIA when it comes to international things, and you've got the Army, the Navy when it comes to things outside the borders. So depending on geographic location, you may need a ground presence, and you may need an air presence, and then you may, if you're surrounded by water, you may need a naval presence. So this city didn't necessarily need a navy because it's not on water. So the militia did cover the ground, but they weren't safe in the air. Not that they had an Air Force, but they used resources from the Air Force basically in order to take that community from those people and burn it down. Also, one of the areas I find, maybe they should have had spies. Maybe they should have had counterintelligence on the outside. It would have been good to have allies to understand what they were planning and know what was going on ahead of time, so that when the quiet came and the calm, there wouldn't have been a false sense of possible security before they dropped the bombs on everybody. If they would have had some counterintelligence, that would have been awesome, and maybe they could have fought maybe longer. But again, when you talk about building community, it's not about, in my opinion, it's not about just having some buildings or owning a couple businesses. Community has to be protected. Also, you have to have sustain. You have to be able to produce food. You have to be able to produce water. Survival. Basic steps in the realm when it comes to building community. First, you've got to find somewhere to live, and then you've got to be able to hold it down and protect it You got to be able to survive. You got to have food, access to shelter, this, that, and the other. So when it comes to a community, it's not a whole lot different. It would, like, I think about that story and I go back and it's like, man, if they would have had somebody on the outside, like if they would have had a presence outside of the city, and when they were coming to burn down their city, they could have had another part of the white community under threat to possibly stop it. So but they had the ground, but they didn't have the air presence. And I think it takes some forward thinking to get to that point. But again, a Black Wall Street, you got to cover every single area of activity in order to build a black community. We're going to need black scientists. We're going to need black nutritionists. We're going to need experts in technology. You're going to need experts in real estate. You're going to need experts in agriculture. You're going to need people all across the spectrum. And what it seems we have is a lot of athletes, which at the same time is awesome, but there's a surplus of athletes and not enough skilled, technical individuals. There's not enough people who are great when it comes to math that we actually see. I mean, there are people who can remember numbers in their head, who can count boom, 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 so quick, but they're not being used. They're not being utilized, and they're being educated in a system that's really not going to be to their benefit. You've got intelligent, super intelligent kids that are trying to make it in football or basketball or some sport or something to that nature. But again, nothing wrong with sports. I couldn't see LeBron James doing something other than playing basketball. He's that special when it comes to that. But for all the successes, how many failures are there that had other skills that could have been used to build a community? Every single aspect of activity, we need our own historians. You have to have medical professionals, dentists, nurses, doctors, surgeons, optometrists. You have to be everywhere. And I think that's how you build a community. You don't build a community with, okay, we just need a whole lot of money and then we'll just have other businesses come in and give us a community. You have to have skilled individuals, and I don't think we're spreading ourselves wide enough. I don't think our youth are getting exposed or put into positions where we can cover every area. We can't all focus on the same thing. I mean, you can go to college, you can major in just about anything. But we don't want to neglect trades. We don't want to neglect carpenters. We need people to be able to build houses. You need people to be able to do the plumbing. We need people to take us into the clean energy era. And we need representation all over the place. There's enough kids to do a little bit of everything. If you see a child that has some kind of a aptitude, build that aptitude, because we have to have all these different areas covered in order to build a community, a real. So it can be done. There are steps that we're going to have to take. But a Black Wall Street can come again. We can do it again. We have to be encouraged. And we have to set our minds and visualize the possibility of what it looks like to actually have a real black community again. Something that black people can be proud of. Don't let it be, I don't want it to be lost that Greenwood was not the only thriving black community. There have been many black communities. A lot of them were destroyed. That's probably the reason why you don't see more now. Where 100 years later, there should be Black Wall Streets all over the place. In every major city, there should be a district like that, if not 2 or 3, in some of your larger cities. And that blueprint should be taken all across the country. And in every little smaller community, you can have black areas of self-sustaining businesses, of community, where even if you go out of town, you still got black community where you can still keep your dollars in your community, and we could grow that way. But again, I just wanted to bring to light what it's like to create something. It takes a vision, and it doesn't take everybody to be on board at the same time. This was 2 guys, 2 men, decided they want a great black community that they can be proud of. They said, we can do it, and they did it. So huge applause for those individuals, and hopefully they inspire others that come after them to do the same thing. I'm going to sign off. I want to thank you for joining. I want to thank you for joining Stark Reality. I hope something was said, or I could have inspired some kind of a thought to help somebody else do something better with themselves or improve in some way or another. But this has been how can we create another Black Wall Street? And I'm Gregory Starks, and I'm out of here. Thank you.